Commenting terrorism as an instrument of statecraft. Why would it take seriously the words of a failed state like Pakistan over that of a democracy like India, especially when there is this equanimity being introduced by the likes of Donald Trump, the US president, and others between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-powered neighbors. At the same time, this entire Operation Sindhur was undertaken by India to try and respond to the act of terror that happened on the 22nd of April in Pahalgam. It was not an equanimous decision, and therefore India and Pakistan, the victim and the perpetrator, cannot be equated to the same. But first, let's bring you this breaking story that's coming through, because it's not just these multi-party delegations that are going to various capitals. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, is in Germany. He's on a three-nation trip to Denmark, to Germany, and of course he will conclude that in the next day or so. After he held talks with the German Foreign Minister, the External Affairs Minister has publicly condemned the terrorist attack that happened on the 22nd of April in Pahalgam. He has supported India's right to defend itself against terrorism, as would be the case with any defined nation state. And number three, he's also advocated bilateral solution between India and Pakistan. Remember, there's been a lot of consternation around the fact and this whole thing that Donald Trump, the US president, has put forth, that somehow the United States was responsible for this mediated ceasefire between India and Pakistan. India, of course, has completely denied that, saying no third party, no United States, no Russia, no one else had any role in bringing about that ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Let me go across to my colleague Siddhant, who has more on this. Siddhant, so once again, the External Affairs Minister, what he said to the Dutch press, now what he's saying to the German press, is that twofold. Number one, that it was bilaterally arrived at between India and Pakistan. It had nothing to do with any third party. And more importantly, India is now drawing a new red line for terror, Pakistan-sponsored, Pakistan-inflicted terror, and that is that there will be cost and pain for the enemy to pay.
Well, absolutely, Zakka. And in fact, the more interesting development here is that there is an open endorsement which is coming from German Foreign Minister to India's right to defend its territory. In fact, just a short while back, this press briefing happened, and in fact, both foreign ministers addressed press in Germany, and there are three points which German Foreign Minister made, Zakka. One, that Germany condemned the terrorist attack on India. Number two, Germany supported India's right to defend itself against terrorism. And number three, advocated bilateral solution between India and Pakistan. Perhaps a big endorsement coming from Germany, Zakka, and especially at a time when, as you rightly pointed out, that there is a narrative which is being built that how world completely isolated India after Pahalgam attack, and perhaps there are countries like China, like Turkey, backing Pakistan openly, but when it comes to supporting India in its right to defend itself against terrorism, perhaps none of these countries came forward and issued a strong statement. But that is not the case, Zakka. In fact, German Foreign Minister gave a big endorsement to India's right to defend itself against terrorism. In fact, he also went on to say that on 7th of May, I beg your pardon, EMS Jaishankar said that on 7th of May, both foreign ministers spoke to each other, and at that point in time also, Germany condemned the terror attacks, and Germany extended support to India in its right to defend itself against terrorism. Having said that, Zakka, Germans were also in touch with French Foreign Ministry. In fact, German Foreign Minister said that on the very first day after Pahalgam attack, he spoke to French Foreign Minister, perhaps to get the first-hand report. So to say this, that West has completely isolated India, none of the countries from the Western world, is coming forward to support India would be wrong. Perhaps a very big endorsement is coming, and this is for the first time on record. This endorsement is coming, that how Germany stood with India before Operation Sindhur, and perhaps again they have reiterated their position that they support India's right to defend itself against terrorism.
All right, Siddhant, we'll leave it at that. So the Indian Foreign Minister, he's on a three-nation trip to the Netherlands, to Copenhagen, and of course to Germany. His latter half will conclude that trip to to Germany, and where he has spoken to media and he has reiterated the message that India and Pakistan bilaterally arrived at the ceasefire. It has nothing to do with any third-party mediation. I want to now shift focus now to what has effectively been a little over 2 weeks after Operation Sindhur. Now voices are coming out from Pakistan on the real extent of the damage that India has managed to carry out deep within Pakistani territory, hundreds of kilometers inside Pakistani territory. Multiple Pakistani members of parliament, now Maryam Nawaz, who is the Chief Minister of Punjab, the daughter of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, she has also come out and asked the very same question. How is it that India managed to hit so far deep inside Pakistani territory? Up until now, up until Operation Sindhur, there was this unsaid red line that with Pakistan, you cannot cross the line of control. With Pakistan, you cannot hit beyond Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. But with Operation Sindhur, India has managed to hit Muridke, Bahawalpur, all of which are tens of kilometers inside Pakistani Punjab. And the extent of the damage that India caused on Pakistan is only now coming to light, given not just the accounts that we're seeing from senior members of parliament in Pakistan, but also ordinary Pakistani citizens. The bigger question, though, is how long will Pakistan and the rest of the world continue to be in denial about the extent of damage left behind in the wake of Operation Sindhur?
किसी ने ये नहीं पूछा कि GHQ से 5 किलोमीटर चकलाला एयरबेस तक ये ड्रोन कैसे पहुंचा, ये धमाका कैसे हुआ। अपने इदारों को हम क्यों डिस्कस ना करें कि हमारे इदारे क्या कर रहे हैं। हमारे जो यहाँ पे फोर्सेस है बलूचिस्तान में, जिनको हमने इतने इख्तियारात दिए हैं, जो मुझे भी तलाशी कर सकता है, मेरे घर में भी बगैर पूछे घुस सकता है, हम उससे क्यों नहीं पूछते कि भाई आप क्या कर रहे हो वहाँ पे।
जो कुछ 9 मई को हुआ और जो कुछ उससे पहले इंडिया ने 6 और 7 मई की शाम को हमला करके किया, उसमें ज्यादा फर्क नहीं है, बल्कि शायद हमने ज्यादा, हमारी उस सियासी जमात ने ज्यादा नुकसान पहुंचाया पाकिस्तान को।
Now, faced with questions of its own failure in the aftermath of Operation Sindhur, the Pakistani army is resorting to threatening India. Pakistani military spokesperson Lieutenant General Ahmed Chaudhry recently echoed very hate-filled sentiments against India, similar to those expressed by terrorist Hafiz Saeed in the past. Now, anybody who's asking about whether there is a link between Pakistani state players and non-state players needs to listen to this. The commonality of language, the commonality of phrases used by both the DGISPR, who is the spokesperson of the Pakistan military, and someone like a Hafiz Saeed. Top intelligence sources have revealed to CNN News18 that the Army Chief General Asim Munir has recently been reading Quranic verses at various meetings of the Corps commanders and other leaders of the Pakistan military. In fact, he's been delivering sermons at places mostly meant for Islamic Maulvis. It is also during these sermons that remarks against Indian forces and the Indian government are being made. There seems to be a spiritual justification for the proxy warfare that Pakistan has unleashed, a sufficient means to transform state-backed terrorism into religious obligation for the soldiers as well as for the radicals. And that's not all. Even soldiers in the Pakistan army, in the olives, in the fatigues, they are indoctrinated with a view that Kashmir is a jihadi cause. Sources have also informed radical Maulvis have been hired to try and teach jihad to Pakistan army recruits.
Sir! अगर तू पानी बंद करेगा इंशाअल्लाह हम तेरी सांस बंद करेंगे, इन दरियाओं में फिर खून बहेगा।
तुम हमारा पानी बंद कर दोगे, हम तुम्हारा सांस बंद कर देंगे।
So it's the exact phraseology between the spokesperson of the Pakistan army and a proscribed terrorist like Hafiz Saeed. Let's try and make sense of this. Tilak Devasher is former member of the National Security Advisory Board, former member of the Cabinet Secretariat, author as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Devasher. This whole thing, you've heard from Pakistani members of Parliament, Umar Farooq, Maryam Nawaz, who's the Chief Minister of Punjab, the biggest province, the daughter of the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, all of them saying, how is it that India managed to penetrate so deep within Pakistan? Do you think eventually these questions that are now being raised by a few parliamentarians, something that the Pakistan army is loath to answer, the Pakistan establishment is loath to bear responsibility for, will it eventually come to bite them back because it seems like they're papering over all of these fault lines, whether it's through the field marshal rank, whether it's through victory celebrations, but eventually the truth just has to come out.
Absolutely. Satyamev Jayate, truth will always come out. And now it is beginning to come out, especially that the initial media hype against India on the 7th and 8th in the West, is now dissipating. You have now more and more learned scholars who have viewed what actually happened, are writing about it and talking about it. So gradually, even the Pakistani public, especially the YouTubers, they are beginning to realize, hey, wait a minute, we were not so successful. And now that more and more evidence is coming out of how India used decoys, which were ones probably that were shot down, and they can see the physical evidence of the damage to the airfields and the terror training camps, terror camps of the Jaish and the Lashkar. So there is now greater realization in Pakistan. And how long can they continue to hide this? Because in this day and age of satellites and of social media, you cannot hide all this together. And you're right, they try to mask it by this promotion of Field Marshal to Asim Munir. First time ever, I think, this rank has been given for a defeat. And even this Kuzdar incident of the bus, and trying to pin it on India, trying to show that India is involved in terrorism and put an equivalence. So all this clearly shows, especially the statement that Maryam Nawaz made. Actually, if you look beneath the surface of the statement, but May 9th is important for Pakistan because the PTI damaged the aura of the Pakistan Army by attacking the symbols of the Pakistan Army, Corps Commander's House, GHQ, Martyrs Memorial. She is comparing that event to the Indian strike between 7th and 10th, showing once again that the aura of the Pakistan Army has been badly damaged. Okay. These are very significant statements. Shehbaz Sharif saying that at 2:30 in the morning, Asim Munir told him that the Noor Khan base had been attacked. So these are all very significant statements, and gradually you're going to hear more and more about it.
But Mr. Devasher, ultimately this round of the Indo-Pakistan conflict seems to have ended in a bit of a stalemate. Pakistan did what it did in Pahalgam. India responded to that. Pakistan then escalated further, but clearly it was not in a position to dominate the escalation ladder. In response, India inflicted a much higher degree of pain on Pakistan. It is said that the cost of using these terror proxies is going to be much higher, so Pakistan will have to rethink on this strategy. Are we in a position, though, at the end of the day, to say that India has inflicted so much of a degree of pain to Pakistan that Pakistan will begin to stop using these terror proxies? At the same time, the question of Pakistan also, this whole business of the law of diminishing returns. Will Pakistan stop using these terror proxies? Because India has now indicated it's not just going to be these non-state actors that India is going to hit at. It's going to hit deep within Pakistan. It's going to hit state actors. And India is not going to make the distinction between state and non-state actors. So will that be a pain enough for the Pakistani establishment to stop using these terror proxies?
I think these are two separate questions. I don't think it was a stalemate. I think India has hit them much harder. And especially on the terror headquarters as well as on the air bases. They hit them much harder. But whether Pakistan will give up terrorism as a result of this, I don't think so. Because, terrorism the last 4 decades, they have trained, they've invested, they find this is a low-cost option to keep India on the boil, keep India under check. It is going to take much more to get Pakistan to abjure. And that much more, that plus or X factor, is the holding in abeyance of the Indus Waters Treaty. Gradually, if you look at the nuances of what is coming out in the Pak media, and especially social media, the lack of water and the danger is now beginning to hurt Pakistan. People in the National Assembly have raised this issue, that 60% of our population is dependent on agriculture, 90% of our electricity and the hydropower and irrigation is all coming from the Indus. If there's any disruption in that, simply because there is no life without water. People are beginning to realize this and starting to make a noise. The army has no answer. They know very well that India is determined that they will start talks on the Indus water, if at all, when Pakistan abjures terrorism completely. It's credible. So this is what is going to hurt Pakistan in the long term, much more than the kinetic action.
All right, Mr. Devashir, stay on with us because I want to talk to you about not just Pakistan, but also something else that's happening in the neighborhood. But I want to shift focus again back to Operation Sindhur, which has managed to hit the pause button. But India's offensive against Pakistan is going to continue. The real challenge for India is going to be fighting not just Pakistan, but its fair weather ally, China. And now there is a Pakistan, China, Afghanistan axis that seems to be building up. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is one aspect of that. It was currently restricted to just the western provinces of China, leading all the way up to the Balochistan port of Gwadar in southern Pakistan. But now they're extending the CPEC project into Afghanistan as well. If that happens, if that materializes, it will have immense consequences for India. So the question is, how can India counter this emerging trilateral between China, Pakistan and Afghanistan? Here's a deep dive. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, is being redrawn not just on maps, but in the real world. From its inception, the $60 billion initiative has functioned as a flagship of China's Belt and Road Initiative, seeking to connect Western China to Pakistan's Gwadar port. But now a new country is being offered a seat at this high table, Afghanistan. This week, the foreign ministers of China, Pakistan and Afghanistan met in Beijing, and they decided to extend the CPEC project into Afghanistan. This would have profound implications for India. From a purely logistical standpoint, Afghanistan offers China and Pakistan three things: location, access, and geopolitical influence. Sitting at the heart of the Eurasian crossroads, Afghanistan provides the shortest overland route between Central Asia and the Arabian Sea. That is where China and Pakistan are jointly building the Gwadar port. For Pakistan, the inclusion of Afghanistan strengthens the narrative that Gwadar is a gateway not just for China's western provinces, but also for Central Asia's energy-rich landlocked countries. It also allows Islamabad to portray the CPEC as a pan-regional initiative, not just a bilateral project between Islamabad and Beijing. For Afghanistan, the benefits of joining CPEC are simple and manifold. Afghanistan's economy has been shattered by years of war. Ever since the Taliban took over in August of 2021, foreign aid has evaporated from the country, banking channels remain frozen, and the emirate is now locked out of all global financial institutions. So, infrastructure investment through the CPEC offers the promise of roads, energy, railway, and consequently employment for the local Afghan people. Desperation is what is making the Taliban more amenable to Chinese terms. And China, as you always know, prefers to have client states. And what better client state than the Taliban and the Emirate of Afghanistan? For India, the corridors and the route that it takes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is POK, is a red line. India has called this illegal. It is protested at every international forum that is possible. Now, with the Taliban eager for investment and China seeking new routes to Central Asia, CPEC expanding into Afghanistan is not just a pipe dream, it is a reality that is unfolding right in India's neighborhood. So why does this matter, and why should India pay attention to this story? Because Afghanistan is not just another neighbor of India. At the heart of Asia, it sits at the crossroads of culture and commerce. It's also a country with which India shares deep civilizational ties. India's investments in Afghan schools, hospitals, other building infrastructure, even the parliament complex has been built by India. All of these cannot be seen as acts of charity or overseas development assistance. These were bets that India took on a stable, independent Afghanistan. While India is yet to officially and diplomatically recognize the Taliban and the Taliban government, Foreign Affairs Minister Jaishankar held a long telephone call recently with the Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi. Afghanistan also supported India unequivocally after the Pahalgam terror attack and even condemned Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. But the new trilateral that is emerging between China, Pakistan and the Taliban threatens to sideline India. It threatens to rewrite the rules of regional engagement. Now, the logic behind CPEC's Afghan extension is simple. For China, Afghanistan offers a land bridge to Central Asia and a shortcut to the mineral riches that Afghanistan has. Lithium, copper, other rare earth minerals, all of which are essential to make the world's semiconductors. For Pakistan, it's a chance to transform Gwadar into a true gateway port, linking the Arabian Sea to the markets of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and beyond Central Asia. On a map, you can see how CPEC's extension into Afghanistan is not just a question of rerouting the existing alignments, this is a complete expansion. Already, multiple studies have explored connecting the Peshawar-Kabul corridor, the Quetta and Kandahar route, and even the strategic Wakhan corridor that goes all the way into Xinjiang. In recent months, Chinese and Pakistani officials have publicly floated ideas of new road and rail lines which crisscross the Durin line. But beneath the surface, the risks are extreme. CPEC's western routes run through Balochistan, which is a province that is ridden with insurgency and resentment. For years now, Baloch separatists have targeted Chinese engineers and Pakistani soldiers. They see the corridor as a symbol of exploitation. Islamabad claims that CPEC will bring prosperity to this region, but the reality is the Baloch people don't trust the Pakistani state or the Pakistani army. Without genuine political cooperation and local Baloch participation, more of these roads and pipelines may just fuel further cycles of violence. Then there is the question of sovereignty. India's opposition to CPEC is rooted in a principle that no project which legitimizes Pakistan's hold over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or POK, is acceptable to India. By drawing the Taliban into a China-led economic initiative, this new CPEC further entrenches the status quo around Kashmir. It also signals a shift in Kabul's foreign policy away from its traditional ties with India and towards a more transactional relationship with both Beijing and Islamabad. What does that mean for India's own regional ambitions? For years now, New Delhi has been championing the Chabahar port in Iran as an alternative route to Central Asia. Chabahar was supposed to be India's answer to Gwadar, a way to bypass Pakistan and assert India's regional autonomy. But US sanctions on Iran over the last number of years have stalled the Chabahar project. Now, with Washington showing signs of a thaw with Tehran, multiple rounds of nuclear talks happening between Washington and Tehran, there is talk of reviving Chabahar yet again. But time is running out. If the CPEC Afghanistan extension succeeds, then the Central Asian trade routes may well be set for decades to come, and India risks being left out on the sidelines. Some in Delhi have been arguing that the answer to this is to double down on Chabahar, to invest more, to move faster, to offer Central Asia a genuine alternative to Chinese expansionism. Others say a more pragmatic approach needs to be taken, and that is to engage with the Taliban, find some common ground with Beijing, and seek a place for India in this new regional order. Both of these paths carry their own risks. The first could possibly provoke Beijing and Islamabad if India continues to double down on Chabahar and use Iran, the United States, and Central Asian republics to press its own case. The second, which is to co-opt the Taliban and to negotiate with China, may undermine India's principled stand on Kashmir. What is clear is that India cannot afford to be a bystander. The maps being drawn today will shape the future of the region for decades to come. If India does nothing, it risks giving away not just its influence, but also its agency, and that too in its own backyard. That would not just be a tragedy, it would be a tragedy for the idea of a plural, open, and connected Asia. But there are steps India can take. First, as some suggest, Delhi must revive Chabahar with both urgency and imagination. This means working with Iran, the United States, the Central Asian republics to make Chabahar a real alternative, not just a diplomatic talking point. Reviving Chabahar and integrating it into the International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC, could actually offer a genuine counterweight to the China-Pakistan-Afghanistan axis. Second, India must also vigorously engage with the Taliban to protect India's interests and investments in Afghanistan. And third, India must work with like-minded countries, whether it's Japan, the European Union, even Russia, to offer the region a vision of connectivity which is open, transparent, and respectful of each other's sovereignty. Above all, infrastructure is not just about roads and ports and airports. It is about ideas and values and the kind of region that India wants to build in Central Asia. Today, as these new corridors are emerging, this trilateral between Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China, India's vision, India's voice should not be lost in this din of great power rivalry. Both America and China must pay attention to New Delhi. I want to go across to Indian American congressman from the House of Representatives, Democrat congressman and part of the India caucus. Ami Bera is now joining us. Thank you very much, Mr. Ami Bera, Mr. Representative. I want to ask you, even as we speak, India has sent various multi-party delegations to different capitals. Some have gone to Europe, some will be coming to Washington, D.C. The idea is to try and impress upon global capitals India's point of view that when it comes to the operations against Pakistan and what India did through Operation Sindhur, why it had to launch it and what was the rationale for it and what it managed to achieve through it. But there is a degree of concern here in India, though, particularly in the manner in which President Trump went about announcing the ceasefire before these two countries could come out and announce it to the world. How would you speak to that concern?
I mean, I would start with, obviously, the terrorist attacks, cross-border attacks a month ago were heinous. And, India did have to respond to that. Their territory was encroached upon. I think there was an appropriate response by India. Obviously, there was a counter response by Pakistan. And I'm glad that both sides, and I think Secretary Rubio played a supporting role here to come to the table to find a ceasefire and to start negotiations. But at the end of this is really between India and Pakistan. I would hope that the United States plays a supporting role here, perhaps other countries. But it at the end of the day is a negotiation between India and Pakistan.
So one of the things, and since you've been a very close friend of India's, you've been part of the India caucus over the last many years, one of the things that India has been consciously trying to do over the last 2 decades or so, certainly, is to try and de-hyphenate itself from Pakistan. In economic terms, India is a much bigger country. It's 10 times bigger economic size-wise, much bigger per capita, much bigger military, and so on and so forth. But aided in some part, I would say, by the United States and President Trump in particular, which wants to see India as a sort of counter in this part of the world to China. Do you think this episode, this last episode between India and Pakistan, has once again re-hyphenated both of these countries? And not least, from what President Trump has been saying on social media and his comments, the US role has brought a certain equanimity between India and Pakistan.
Yeah, they're not equals in the sense that we see India's growing role in the world. I've been a strong supporter of making India a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It certainly should reflect the 21st century. India is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing economy in the world. It's a major partner with the United States in the Quad coalition, India, United States, Japan, and Australia. And India's role in the world will continue to grow. Pakistan, on the other hand, has real economic consequences, has climate change is impacting it. And then the domestic terror threats inside Pakistan can be destabilizing. So they're two countries on different trajectories.
So
I would look at it from that perspective.
Okay, where does this then leave this whole equation here in the subcontinent? Because India has always believed that eventually, over the next 10, 20, 30 years, the great power competition is going to be between the United States and China, and India is going to be sort of firmly in the US corner. But an equanimous approach now between India and Pakistan, does it not concern you that the long-term plan of trying to prop up India as a counterweight to China is somehow being derailed?
So again, I can only speak on behalf of the United States Congress and not for President Trump. From the congressional perspective, we see India's role growing in the world. So I would like to see India not boxed into South Asia, but actually be a major player at the table with the other major players in the world. So again, I do think India's long-term trajectory is to greater collaboration with the West, the United States, Europe, other democracies around the world. India obviously has concerns on its northern border with China. And what does that look like? China may take the approach to box India in, But again, I think it's in India's interest to continue to be a major player in the world. We will continue to encourage India to think beyond South Asia. There's things that we could do together in Africa, working together along with the Japanese and the Gulf states. So I think India's trajectory is one of a bigger role on the world stage. On the flip side, we do see China and Pakistan closer together, but the Chinese approach is generally a one-way street. What's in China's interest? And again, we do want to see a stable Pakistan. It's not in anyone's interest to see instability in a nuclear-armed country like Pakistan. So that's going to be a different approach.
But I do want to know your thoughts, though, on, for military planners, for example, this has been a bit of a confrontation, a scenario that they've been planning for decades now, where you have this active two-front confrontation that India is faced with. On the one side, you have Pakistan. On the other side, you have China. What we saw in this flare-up, this latest conflict, is that Pakistan was essentially using Chinese military equipment. So some would say that, look, the partnership is already seemingly at India's doorstep. What can the United States do to address that specific concern?
Sure. So again, I would not read too much into President Trump's statements. I would look at the statements that came out of Congress. I would also think about in the first week of the Trump administration at the ministerial level, they did have a quad meeting. Jay Shankar was here in the United States. I think there'll be a delegation of parliamentarians coming from India, and look forward to welcoming them. Again, the defense-to-defense relationship between India and the United States remains as strong as ever, and I think that will continue to grow. I think as we look to build our pharmaceutical industry, build new supply chains, I think you could see more of that moving from China into India. I think that will strengthen the partnership. I think Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have a good relationship from everything that I can see. And again, trade negotiations are ongoing. They'll take some time, but hopefully we will finally get a trade agreement bilaterally between the United States and India. So again, I think the trajectory is moving in the right direction. And then, we will see how talks between India and Pakistan go. I certainly think the United States has to play an important role here, a supportive role, but other countries like Japan, the Gulf states can also potentially play a supportive role.
One final word, Representative. I know you've been saying that you can't speak for the Trump administration, you can speak for Congress, but the U.S. president has been saying repeatedly, and he's been using trade in the context of India and Pakistan. And the problem and the concern here in India is you can't quite equate the two. Trade and terror are not quite the same, because India retaliated against Pakistan for a terror attack which killed innocent civilians, 26 civilians segregated by religion, and they were killed. To say, and for the President of the United States to say that, look, I said, let's trade, guys, and let's stop this war, trade and terror are not quite in the same league. So how would you speak to that concern?
Yeah, I wouldn't conflate the two issues. India was responding to a terror attack on its soil, and I think that was an appropriate response. I think trade negotiations are separate and they're different. So I would separate those two and have two very different conversations.
Okay. Representative Ami Bera, part of the India caucus in the United States Congress, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Thank you. All right, meanwhile, shifting focus to the neighborhood in Dhaka in Bangladesh seems to be rife with speculation that the chief advisor, the interim leader of Bangladesh, Professor Mohammad Yunus, may about to be resigning from his position because his position seems to be tenuous. He's now directly at loggerheads with the army chief in Bangladesh. The army chief wants an inclusive election. He wants it as early as possible. He's even set a deadline of December 2025, before which he believes the election should happen. But will that force Yunus's hand? And if that were to happen, what does that mean for India? Here's a deep dive.
Bangladesh is on the brink of another political crisis. Less than a year after Sheikh Hasina's ouster, Bangladesh could see a regime change once again. Mohammad Yunus, the head of the caretaker government, is facing flak from all quarters and could be on his way out. Maybe not voluntarily, but his exit seems to be just a matter of time. Speculation is abuzz in Dhaka that Yunus could resign 9 months after he took over. What gave wings to the speculation was the meeting between Nahid Islam, convener of the National Citizen Party, and Mohammad Yunus on 22nd of May at the latter's official residence. During that meeting, Yunus expressed his displeasure and concern over the current situation and said that he would not be able to work in these circumstances. Pressure is mounting on Mohammad Yunus, and the last 1 week has been tumultuous for the head of the caretaker government. The one man leading the charge against Yunus is the Bangladeshi army chief. Differences between the duo have been increasingly evident. What's interesting is that it was this very man who installed Yunus at the helm after Sheikh Hasina's removal as the Prime Minister last year. And now, he seems to be baying for Yunus's blood. A case of poetic justice, if you will. Bangladesh Army Chief General Wakar-uz-Zaman minced no words in holding Yunus accountable. His advice was simple: hold early elections, stop interfering with military matters, and keep the military in the loop on key issues like the proposed corridor. Mohammad Yunus was installed as the head of caretaker government, a temporary one that would eventually pave the way for elections to be held in Bangladesh. 9 months on, that's far from happening. Maybe because Yunus has spent most of his time in the last 9 months traveling the world rather than attend to pressing matters at home. But Zaman is not going to let Yunus forget that. He's not going to let him forget that Yunus indeed is a placeholder, a man without the people's mandate. Zaman wants to be seen as a savior, the army not as a usurper. Hence the push for early elections. He wants Mohammad Yunus to hold elections by the end of this year, but the caretaker government claims that it can only happen by mid-2026. Another bone of contention between the duo is the Chittagong-Rakhine corridor, which Yunus was willing to create to deliver humanitarian supplies to Myanmar. The army chief called it a bloody corridor. The Bangladeshi army chief made it clear that he is firmly against dragging Bangladesh into the festering civil war in Myanmar. The Bangladesh's leading political parties are also with the army on this matter. Awami League, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, as well as all the left parties in the country have all opposed the Rakhine corridor, which is seen as a part of an American power play to block China's land-to-sea access. Now, patience is running thin in Bangladesh. For the first time since Mohammad Yunus-led administration assumed power, tensions spilled onto the streets of the country's capital. Public demonstrations were witnessed, renewed calls are being made by thousands of BNP supporters especially, who marched through the city of Dhaka. The protests have been going on for a week now, but they have seen a significant escalation over the last 2 days. The clock seems to be ticking for Mohammad Yunus. But is there a military coup in the offing in Bangladesh? The growing rift between the interim government and the military raises concerns around Bangladesh's political stability. The military's dissatisfaction could lead to an increased pressure on the interim administration or perhaps a potential takeover. Now, the international community is closely monitoring the situation, urging all parties to work towards a peaceful resolution and the timely restoration of democratic processes. What about India then? Should India be worried? Now, New Delhi's relations with Dhaka have been frosty since the dispensation led by Yunus came to power. There are a number of reasons for that. Attacks on Hindu minorities, release of radical elements from prisons across Bangladesh, and lifting of bans on organizations that have pushed their terror agenda into India. That's just to name a few issues that India has with the Yunus government. The recent remarks made by the head of the caretaker government on India's northeast have only added fuel to the fire. Trade is also affected between the two countries. Just last week, India restricted imports of ready-made garments from Bangladesh. We barred a number of range of consumer goods to 13 land borders in the northeast and West Bengal. In response, Bangladesh has cancelled a big-ticket defence contract worth 180 crores with a Kolkata-based public sector shipbuilder. That's another reflection of the downturn in ties. Now, given this, could the Bangladeshi army being at the helm be seen as a factor of stability in Bangladesh, or will that only make matters worse? Now, while an army coup may not directly threaten India's sovereignty, it would undermine regional stability. It can also strain bilateral relations and complicate India's strategic objectives in the South Asia. Therefore, India has several strong reasons to be concerned. For one, border security. India shares a border with Bangladesh, a lot of which is porous, which spans about 4,000 kilometers. Any unrest could lead to cross-border violence, into arms smuggling, or even infiltration by extremist groups. Political turmoil in Bangladesh could lead to a surge of refugees into India as well, especially into states like Assam, West Bengal and Tripura. It could strain local resources, it could potentially trigger communal tensions as well. Thirdly, India's northeastern states, which are already sensitive due to ethnic and separatist issues, could be destabilized further by the spillover effect from the unrest in Bangladesh. There also could be setbacks to counter-terrorism efforts as well. A military regime might not prioritize or maintain the same level of cooperation that we've seen between India and Bangladesh in the past, and that could create security blind spots for India. The biggest concern of them all, though, is greater Chinese influence in the region. China and Pakistan have emerged as Yunus's most ardent supporters. Both nations see Yunus's prolonged hold on power and the indefinite delay of elections as beneficial to their own regional ambitions. With a military regime, China could eye greater role with funding or military support, much like what they are doing in Pakistan. That would put India's strategic interests in the Bay of Bengal, BIMSTEC and regional connectivity projects all at risk. For now, New Delhi has decided to adopt a wait-and-watch approach, hoping that Bangladesh does not go the Pakistan way.
So we're still in conversation with Mr. Tilak Devashir from the Cabinet Secretariat formally. I do want to ask you, Mr. Devashir, about this whole power play, this power struggle that seems to be happening in Bangladesh. Who wins this round between the interim head of the caretaker government, that is Professor Mohammad Yunus, and the interim army chief, General Waqar Zaman, who seems to have set this deadline of December 2025 to be for elections to be held in Bangladesh. He definitively wants those elections by that deadline. But the opposition doesn't quite buy that. In fact, the head of interim government says it can be any months post-December 2025 all the way up to June 2026. How do you see this sort of playing out?
Right now, as we speak, there is no clarity. I mean, there's a lot of obfuscation. I mean, some reports say that Yunus wants to resign or he has threatened resignation. But conventional wisdom would be that if there is a clash between the army and an interim leader, the army will win out every time. I don't think so that Yunus has popular support either. I mean, there have been student protests against him too. I don't see him being able to establish his writ, but you never know. The army chief may well be a very honorable man and say, no, I don't want any of this, you sort it out yourself. So I think right now, I at least don't have clarity, but I think Bangladesh is entering a bit of uncharted waters and things could go either way. Okay. The fear is that the street may take over once again. And what does the Bangladesh army do in that, at that particular time? Do they support Yunus? They don't support Yunus? Do they go with the street? Or, as you mentioned, there's a new dispensation that takes over. So I think it's in a bit of a flux. I think the next week, 10 days is going to be pretty critical.
All right, Mr. Tilak Devashir, thank you very much for joining us, for all your perspective, your thoughts. Thank you indeed for joining us here on CNN News 18. Thank you.
The world's most famous university is now at the center of America's most dangerous academic crackdown. In a move that's sending shockwaves across global campuses, the Trump administration has officially barred Harvard from enrolling international students. Homeland Security says Harvard can no longer admit foreign students. Those already on campus must now transfer or lose their legal status. The university's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, essential to hosting international students, has been revoked. This is because Trump's team says Harvard is allegedly fostering violence, promoting anti-Semitism, and even coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party. These claims, many unsupported, are the official justification.
He's trying to destroy everything good about this country. He's trying to tear down everything that our history and the best aspects of our political system have left us with. He's trying to destroy the legacy of America. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand America.
This isn't a one-off incident, but the latest chapter in a months-long standoff between Trump and Harvard. The administration has demanded ideological and structural changes, from dismantling diversity programs to turning over protest surveillance footage. Harvard refused and Trump retaliated. First, it was with a $2.6 billion federal grant freeze. Then with threats to strip its tax-exempt status. Now with this. At stake is the academic freedom of America's oldest university and the future of nearly 7,000 international students from over 140 countries, including close to 800 from India. Since returning to office, Trump's administration has unleashed a full-blown cultural offensive on elite institutions, particularly those seen as liberal or pro-Palestine. Harvard's refusal to comply with a list of demands, including reforming admissions, providing ideological audits, and reining in student protests, triggered an unprecedented response. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Harvard failed to provide records of international students' violent or illegal activities, despite the university submitting the information. The administration claims that's grounds for a visa purge. But many call it authoritarian overreach, punishing students for their political beliefs and stripping universities of their independence. Harvard calls the move unlawful and retaliatory. The university is fighting back in court, citing First Amendment violations and misuse of immigration authority. A federal judge has already blocked the administration from revoking student legal status en masse, calling it a game of whack-a-mole. The ruling halts arrests or deportations until due process is followed. The escalation also follows the now infamous December 2023 congressional hearing, where Republican lawmaker Elise Stefanik grilled then Harvard President Claudine Gay on anti-Semitism, eventually forcing her resignation.
Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
Harvard insists it will not bow to political intimidation. President Alan Garber has said, and I quote, "The university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights." But for students, the damage is done. Foreign scholars face sudden academic exile. Research labs risk collapse. Internships, visas, and careers are now in limbo. Students from Austria to India are scrambling for answers. Harvard's international office has urged calm but offered no clarity. Some students may lose their tuition, housing, and immigration status. Experts say the crackdown could lead to a chilling effect, with international applications to US colleges dropping sharply, especially from China, South Asia, and the Middle East. The administration has warned other universities. Columbia, NYU, UCLA may be next. If they don't comply, they too may lose the ability to host international students.
To defend the US from potential threats from Iran, China, and beyond, President Donald Trump unveiled the Golden Dome missile defense system. This first-of-its-kind weapon system will be America's very first defense initiative in space.
In the campaign, I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors.
With an investment of $25 billion in its first phase, the Golden Dome promises to be operational by the end of President Trump's second term, ensuring American skies remain secure for decades to come. According to defense experts, US faces challenges from adversaries who are actively designing systems to exploit gaps in defenses. The Golden Dome is America's answer to this escalating threat, providing a shield capable of defending against missiles launched from the other side of the world or even from space. Designed to combat a range of threats including ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles, and drones, the Golden Dome is said to be a game changer. This advanced missile shield will integrate cutting-edge technologies across land, sea, and space, providing a multi-layered defense.
Ultimately, this right here, the Golden Dome for America, is a game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans.
Inspired by Israel's Iron Dome, but on a much grander scale, the Golden Dome will utilize a combination of next-generation technologies. It will be capable of intercepting missiles at various stages of their trajectory, before launch, mid-flight, and even in space. Space-based sensors and interceptors will track threats from afar, while the Golden Dome's advanced radar systems will ensure rapid identification and neutralization of enemy missiles.
All the space satellites at L3 Harris.
From the Arctic to the battlefield, no target will be beyond the reach of America's most advanced defense network.
Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space. And we will have the best system ever built. As you know, we helped Israel with theirs, and it was very successful, and now we have technology that's even far advanced from that.
The Golden Dome is not just a defense system, it's a message to the world, a message that the United States will not be vulnerable to hostile attacks. With the Golden Dome in place, America strengthens its position as the global leader in defense innovation, deterring adversaries from even thinking about escalating to missile or nuclear conflict. In addition to securing the homeland, Canada has also expressed interest in joining the initiative, citing its need to protect the Arctic region and stay ahead of emerging threats.
Canada wants to be a part of it, which be, fairly small expansion, but we'll work with them on pricing. We'll be dealing with them on pricing. They know about it very much. They've asked to be a part of it, actually. They've asked us to be a part of it. I think it's something that is great if you can afford to do it.
Such a high-tech system comes at a price. For the first phase, a budget of $25 billion is already allocated. However, the total cost of the project will reach upwards of $175 billion over its lifetime, an investment that is essential to ensuring the safety of future generations. Experts anticipate that the space-based components alone could cost upwards of $542 billion over the next 20 years, a necessary expenditure to maintain an unparalleled defense capability.
I'll let you answer that.
Overseeing the development of the Golden Dome will be General Michael Gutlein, Vice Chief of Space Operations at the US Space Force. With decades of experience in aerospace and defense strategy, General Gutlein brings unmatched expertise to the project, ensuring that this ambitious initiative is executed with precision and excellence. Under his leadership, the United States will build a defense system that redefines how we protect our nations.
I'm also pleased to report that the One Big Beautiful Bill will include $25 billion for the Golden Dome to help construction get underway. That's the initial sort of a down deposit. And we have probably, you're talking about, General, we're talking about $175 billion total cost of this when it's completed. This afternoon, I'm also announcing that I will appoint, very importantly, General Gutlein to lead the ambitious new effort as the direct reporting program manager for the Golden Dome. Very talented man, and I'm very honored to have been the one that helped to have really created Space Force. Space Force has turned out to be a tremendous success. We were third in space, and now we're number one in space by a lot. It's not even close. And Mike is a 4-star Space Force general.
However, the move has sparked criticism from global powers. Russia and China have voiced their concerns, calling the Golden Dome deeply destabilizing, fearing that it could turn space into a militarized battlefield. Criticism aside, the Golden Dome will be serving as a cornerstone of defense strategy, ensuring that American skies and the country remain safe and secure.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
To my colleague Siddhant, who has more on this. Siddhant, so once again, the External Affairs Minister, what he said to the Dutch press, now what he's saying to the German press, is that twofold. Number one, that it was bilaterally arrived at between India and Pakistan. It had nothing to do with any third party. And more importantly, India is now drawing a new red line for terror, Pakistan-sponsored, Pakistan-inflicted terror, and that is that there will be cost and pain for the enemy to pay.
Well, absolutely, Zakka. And in fact, the more interesting development here is that there is an open endorsement which is coming from German Foreign Minister to India's right to defend its territory. In fact, just a short while back, this press briefing happened, and in fact, both foreign ministers addressed press in Germany, and there are three points which German Foreign Minister made, Zakka. One, that that Germany condemned the terrorist attack on India. Number two, Germany supported India's right to defend itself against terrorism. And number three, advocated bilateral solution between India and Pakistan. Perhaps a big endorsement coming from Germany, Zakka, and especially at a time when, as you rightly pointed out, that there is a narrative which is being built that how world completely isolated India after Pahalgam attack, and perhaps there are countries like China, like Turkey, backing Pakistan openly, but when it comes to supporting India in its right to defend itself against terrorism, perhaps none of these countries came forward and issued a strong statement. But that is not the case, Zakka. In fact, German Foreign Minister gave a big endorsement to India's right to defend itself against terrorism. In fact, he also went on to say that on 7th of May, I beg your pardon, EMS Jaishankar said that on 7th of May, both foreign ministers spoke to each other, and at that point in time also, Germany condemned the terror attacks, and Germany extended support to India in its right to defend itself against terrorism. Having said that, Zakka, Germans were also in touch with French foreign ministry. In fact, German foreign minister said that on the very first day after Pahalgam attack, he spoke to French foreign minister, perhaps to get the first-hand report. So to say this, that West has completely isolated India, none of the countries from the Western world, is coming forward to support India would be wrong. Perhaps a very big endorsement is coming, and this is for the first time on record. This endorsement is coming that how Germany stood with India before Operation Sindhur, and perhaps again they have reiterated their position that they support India's right to defend itself against terrorism.
All right, Siddhant, we'll leave it at that. So the Indian Foreign Minister, he's on a three-nation trip to the Netherlands, to Copenhagen, and of course to Germany. His latter half will conclude that trip to Germany, where he has spoken to media and he has reiterated the message that India and Pakistan bilaterally arrived at the ceasefire. It has nothing to do with any third-party mediation.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
To my colleague Siddhant, who has more on this. Siddhant, so once again, the External Affairs Minister, what he said to the Dutch press, now what he's saying to the German press, is that twofold. Number one, that it was bilaterally arrived at between India and Pakistan. It had nothing to do with any third party. And more importantly, India is now drawing a new red line for terror, Pakistan-sponsored, Pakistan-inflicted terror, and that is that there will be cost and pain for the enemy to pay.
Well, absolutely, Zakka. And in fact, the more interesting development here is that there is an open endorsement which is coming from German Foreign Minister to India's right to defend its territory. In fact, just a short while back, this press briefing happened, and in fact, both foreign ministers addressed press in Germany, and there are three points which German Foreign Minister made, Zakka. One, that that Germany condemned the terrorist attack on India. Number two, Germany supported India's right to defend itself against terrorism. And number three, advocated bilateral solution between India and Pakistan. Perhaps a big endorsement coming from Germany, Zakka, and especially at a time when, as you rightly pointed out, that there is a narrative which is being built that how word completely isolated India after Pahalgam attack, and perhaps there are countries like China, like Turkey, backing Pakistan openly, but when it comes to supporting India in its right to defend itself against terrorism, perhaps none of these countries came forward and issued a strong statement. But that is not the case, Zakka. In fact, German Foreign Minister gave a big endorsement to India's right to defend itself against terrorism. In fact, he also went on to say that on 7th of May, I beg your pardon, EMS Jaishankar said that on 7th of May, both foreign ministers spoke to each other. And at that point in time also, Germany condemned the terror attacks, and Germany extended support to India in its right to defend itself against terrorism. Having said that, Zakka, Germans were also in turn.
Viewers, there's an unwritten rule in politics. Never play politics over national security. Never undermine your country when it is facing a crisis, a war-like situation. And if you're planning to ask questions, make sure they further the national interest. The Congress party forgot all these rules, all these axioms, and today is looking decidedly poorer for it, in a stunning twist that lays bare the Congress party's staggering hypocrisy.